House music is all about the groove. Some of the most insane dance floor bangers work with only one chord step and some uplifting drums on top. Early productions in this genre also relied heavily on sampling from vinyl records. So let's start this track by creating our own drum loop and pretend we've sampled it from a turntable. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you my favorite ways to do this. From the Soul Magic expansion, I loaded the Chambers 60s kit, and I'm going to create my first pattern now. There's some close and hi-hats giving me my basic groove. And I'm gonna add another tambourine sound on top here together with this clap and a little bit of a guitar stab. And there's another snare to fill the gaps on the fourth note of each bar. Now on top of this groove, I'm gonna add a little vinyl crackle sample to really give it that turntable vibe. I'm going to take all of this now and sample it back into a sampler in Maschine. I open up a second group, hit the sampling button. Yes, sync is already active, 2 bars, perfect. Go over, make sure the correct input is selected, chamber kit, and I can hit start now. So this is the sample that I'm gonna keep on working with now, and I'm gonna be radical now and delete the first group again. This also helps me to move along creatively very, very quickly, and I can start sampling this file right away, similar to what I would do when I got it from a vinyl record. So let's say slicing and split mode, and yeah, just 4 parts, equal parts are enough for me to work with. Let's check it first. And now I could only work with the first half of these slices to recreate a closed head pattern. But it will have this special groove that we are looking for. All right, here are my slices, and I'm gonna record another pattern right away. I'm gonna hit the quantize 50% 1 or 2 times to even it out a little, and then move over to the plugin settings, because this is where all the magic is happening. Here, I'm going to select the MP60 engine to add a little more of that lo-fi character. And on page number 2, I move the tune down by 1 semitone only. And this will change the rhythmical content of the sample as well, without having to use any groove options here inside of Maschine, just by changing the sample itself. Most house tracks use a 4/4 time signature, and to make a 4/4 beat come alive, there's a couple of tricks you can do. For example, attenuate every second and fourth beat of each bar in one way or another. For this example, I'm going to be using 3 kick drums at once. Let's open up the step sequencer and program one of these onto every quarter note. Once this is done, I'm selecting the ones on the 2 and the 4, and I make sure to make them very, very short. And as opposed to those, I'm going to select the other ones and make them very, very, very long. Now, I'll be selecting another bass kick. This I'll be programming only onto the 2 and the 4. And now you're feeling how the beat changes into a more like ping pong feel. Let's take another kick drum and layer it with the ones that are already there, and maybe even add a little pickup here, and also shorten it a little bit. All right, now we have this 4/4 beat going on, but still there's this back and forth pull that we have been striving for. And before I move over to the next ingredient, I'm gonna quickly resample this kick drum pattern again, because I really think that helps moving quickly in a creative way. This time I'm gonna roll with sync mode and set the length to 2 bars. For the input source, I'm gonna look for the group that contains the Darlington kit from the System Clash expansion and build up my percussion group even further. So I'm gonna select my little closed hat, enter step mode, and program a couple of notes here in the off. With full velocity. And then for the ghost notes, I turn this off and hit a couple of soft ones right after. So I have a little bit of a variation in the velocity levels. Great. I'm going to select a snare drum and put it on a 2 and a 4. And even have a little ghost note in between to add excitement. So all of this is going to be layered one more time with another snare drum from the Darlington kit. Now, the drum pattern sounds fire already, but I want to put a little bit of an icing on the cake now. And there's this symbol called console number 2 from the Free Forms expansion, which I'm layering with the 4/4 pattern of the kick right on top. And I also leave it unquantized to have that kind of floaty feel to it, similar to a jazz trio. Now let's resample this to another group again. This time I'm gonna resample 2 different versions. In the first round, I'm gonna capture the original percussion pattern that I've just created. And for the second round of resampling, I go back to my kit and I'm gonna tune it down so it sounds a little different. And I'm gonna take this to another sampler in my drum group right away. Hit start, and here you go. Wonderful. I now have 2 versions of the same drum pattern in slightly different pitches. Now I'm going to go to my mixer, make sure that I hit the 4D encoder so the panning values show up here. And I'm going to hard pan both versions to the left and the right side. Now, if I will be playing those 2 variations in parallel, you're going to hear that there's this weird kind of stereo spread which is going on without sacrificing any of the mono compatibility. The groove is rolling and I'm looking for some ear candy, for a signature sound that sticks out a little bit. And in the System Clash expansion, there was this vocal loop, See Old Harbor. So I'm punching this in now into the step sequencer. And in the next step, I'm going to be doing something very unusual. While I'll be recording that sample back into a Maschine audio plugin, I'm going to be changing the pattern length during the recording. And this will actually be, an experimental way to find some new rhythms with that vocal sample to see if we can find a little magic spot to be used later in the song. First of all, I'm going to set up my little resampler. Make sure that this time the loop is free so I can record as much material as I want. And I go over to the sources, make sure to select group E, which carries my vocals. Hit the start button and move over to group E, play the project, go into the pattern, and then start moving the length. And as you see, I'm holding down the shift button, which allows me to go in fine increments, and then I just freak out, I experiment. And I could already hear there are some sweet spots. I think I'm going to end it with this one. Go back to group D and say stop. We have a whole section of me playing with that vocal sample. I'm going to make sure to select a small portion of this one. And I'll be moving around. You see that each section carries actually a different rhythm, a different pattern. Whenever I find the perfect section, the sweet spot in this recording, I stop my experimentation process. And I'm going to take this little snippet to use it during my song later on in the arrangement. For example, if I go from one section to the other, a vocal sample like this can be very, very useful to create a transition. Now it's time to bring in some wide and snappy soul claps. And here's my favorite recipe to do this. First, I went into the browser, and in the Soul Magic expansion, I selected the tags drums and claps. So the result list shows me only claps of that expansion. I went through those and picked a couple of favorites and distributed them to these 5 pads in group C. If you go to the mixer and hit the 4D encoder once, you can start changing the panning of all the claps. And I would just hard pan 2 of those and the other ones a little bit more narrow in the stereo field. And I keep the 5th one just in the middle. So I have a collection of different claps in different pannings. And I'll also make sure that I change the volume a little bit and make it a little uneven. Now when I will record the next pattern, I'll make very sure to not hit all the pads at the same time, but rather strum those. This will emulate a group of people clapping in front of a microphone, and they won't be all in perfect sync. So this is what I'm trying to come up with here. And you can see here in my recording that it worked out pretty nicely. All those snare drums are kind of arranged around every 2nd and 4th note of my beat. But when zooming in, you'll notice that none of them hits the beat correctly. But some of them are a little early, others are late. This is exactly the way I wanted it to sound. All right, those drums really hit the spot and I'm really feeling it. So let's bring in a melody. I open up the browser and in the Set and Looks expansion, there are dozens of key loops to choose from. Let's start with one of those and then I jump through the result list and see what fits best. I like that one. Let's bring up the level a little bit. You know what's still missing? A little shaker playing on top of the percussion section. And Maschine's percussion module also has an engine called shaker, which sounds like this. One thing that a lot of users don't know is that when you bring it to the performer mode, you can hold down a pad and the shaker will start playing automatically. And those values here below the display allow you to change the signature, for example, bring it to even uneven length like I did here with the 3. I added some swing and even some twist, and all you gotta do is hit record and hold that note. And now the shaker is playing on the track. I've muted the drum section quickly so you can get the full vibe of this. And here are 2 more loops I found in the Satin Looks expansion that exactly fit the scale of my track right now. It's this bell pattern. And another synth section on top, which even includes a little bit of a whistling sound. And here's another one-shot sample called Sound Effects Ice Cold. It comes from the Burnt Hues expansion, and I'm gonna just add 1 note to this pattern. 2, 3, and... All right, the melody section sounds like it's having the time of its life, and I want to bring in a sidechain compressor now to make the melody breathe in sync to the music. There is 2 things we need for this. The first one is a kick drum sound, which I loaded into sound number 16, and I made sure to program a 4/4 pattern, just a straight 4/4 pattern. And I also made sure to bring the level of this kick drum down to 0, so we actually cannot hear it in the final mix. And the second thing I need is a compressor on the group bus, which contains the synth and key loops. Here I make sure to go to the second page, and I'm going to select the Sound 16 kick drum channel as an input source for the sidechaining here in the compressor. So now everything is set up, and when I unmute the bass kick, you can hear that the melody starts pumping in a 4/4 manner. And hear that it's kind of breathing, closing, opening, and it's just doing this. And to take it to the next level, I have a second pattern where I take these kick drums and I programmed it on 8th notes instead. So when I go into this pattern, you will hear that rhythmical behavior of the breathing changing right away into an 8th note. It's now going really quickly. Pattern 1 goes 4th notes. Pattern 2, this double time kind of feeling. And I'm going to use both of these patterns later on during my arrangement. This Rhodes loop does already feature a subtle bass line in the back, and the kick drum pattern also comes with a very solid low end. But for the second part of my arrangement, I would love to have a little bass line coming in additionally, preferably with a little bit more of a plucky sound. In the Freeform expansion, there was this one preset called Witty Bass, which sounded like this. I played around and found a little melody. And once I was happy, I copied the whole melody to a second sound here in Machine. And I replaced the Witty Bass preset with the bass synth from Machine. And I'm going to unmute this now so you can hear it. And you can hear right away that it's becoming more round, more holistic, and cuts much better through the mix. I then went in and automated 2 of those parameters here in the Machine bass synth. The modulation amount to come up with this growly behavior from time to time, and the decay knob, which I actually automated live on the hardware, holding down the auto button and then moving the decay parameter from time to time. Expansions also come with ready-to-play presets for our synths Monarch, Prism, and Massive. In the Satin Looks expansion, there is this preset called Top Bells, and the idea was to double the main melody to push it really for the peak of my track. And you know what? It wouldn't be a real house track if there wasn't an open hi-hat that sounds like a 909, right? There's a certain moment when you realize that all the major building blocks of a new track magically came together, and it's about time to arrange those into a piece of music. My secret recipe is to record a little live jam first, muting some elements here and there, tweaking some sounds, and maybe even switching some patterns in Machine while I'm recording all of this into a sampler. This keeps me from overthinking the whole process. I'm opening up a new empty group and the sampler. I make sure that the master is selected in the input source selection. And also I make sure that detect mode is on with the threshold right above the off value, around 59. So when I hit start and play the project, it will just pick up and start the recording right away. Great. The next thing I'm going to make sure is to mute a couple of things that I don't want to play in the beginning of my jam. And yeah, that already happens, so we can start right away. You'll be surprised how listening to this draft version will inspire you to make decisions for your final arrangement. Sometimes those versions will even be the ones being published. But in any case, I promise you, you'll come up with a track structure to be recreated inside the arranger and gain a little head start.
Boris. 2 words. Boris.
And now I move over to my sampler group again and make sure to stop the recording so it's not going to go on forever. And here it is, my little live jam that I can start listening to and get inspired by. One thing I may want to do now is to listen to it on the road to get more ideas, and this is where Ozone 10 comes in. Fortunately, Ozone 10 is fully NKS supported. This means that I can go into my Machine browser and look and load Ozone presets right away from the Machine hardware. Of course, there are different banks for different purposes and also all types of tags that you could dial into, including genre presets. But what I'm going to propose is a much more radical approach. I'm leave the result list open, showing all the results, 161 at the moment. And I'm going to play my track and load a random preset from the Ozone list here. Whenever I find one like this that fits my material, I will hold down Shift and set this preset as a favorite. The star appears right next to it, And I just move on and keep jumping to the next one. And I keep listening closely.
Boris.
After a while, I will end up with a selection of a couple of favorites that I came across. And hitting this button over here will sort my result list and show me only my favorites. So I'm gonna do a final shootout now, see which of these presets really works best with my material, with my track here, and then I'm gonna just render it out. I do agree that this is a very simple and surface level approach to mastering with Ozone, but it's an amazing piece of gear. And if you do want to find out more about it, I would highly recommend checking out this video above from my colleague Jeff Manchester on the iZotope channel. So that was house music on Maschine. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and got some inspiration for your own productions out of this. Stay tuned and see you again soon.